Welcome back. I pray you've had a wonderful week in the study of Ruth. We are in chapter 3 today, and here's what I want to tell you. It's starting to get good, okay? It's starting to get good. You know, over the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity to watch two of my older daughters meet the one. And my oldest daughter is married. My second oldest daughter is about to get married. Some of you know her. And, you know, it's interesting. There's a point when you're dating, and you girls know this, where like the person in the background kind of moves to the foreground and you start to say, oh, this is going to be a thing. Well, I think today we are going to see that Boaz is squarely going to move to the foreground of this story. And so we are going to enjoy getting to see how that unfolds. Now, I do want to just give a word of caution. We are obviously not going to be speaking of anything that is inappropriate or salacious, but we are going to be speaking about some things that might be a little more sensitive in nature and things that you might not want to introduce to a younger audience quite yet. So I just want to go on and let you know, if you've got little ears around, you might want to watch this a different time, or at least preview it before you would let your young children hear it again. Not going to hear anything that's bad or inappropriate, but just we're going to be dealing with some adult things today. So open up your Bibles and let's go to Ruth 3 and we'll get started. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." And she replied, "All that you say, I will do." Okay, then. So that's how it's going to be. Okay, let's unpack this a little bit further. What we see is that our two main characters, Naomi and Ruth, they are still solidly a unit. They are loyal to one another. They love one another, and they are seeking the best for one another. Naomi, in particular, really has an affection for Ruth as a mom, and she's looking out for her. In fact, this idea of rest is very much what we saw her say in Ruth 1 when she is trying to get Orpah and Ruth to go back to their families when she's going back to Bethlehem. And so this idea of rest is not like, hey, you know, I know that you need a nap. It's been a hard, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about rest in the security sense. You know, women, that's a big thing for us. We want to have some security. What she's saying is you're living day to day, meal by meal at this point, but I long for you to have some security, some rest, someone to take care of you. And so that Hebrew word is manawah. And it's just nearly the exact same word that she used at the beginning. So it's in the understanding of being taken care of for. And the way that would be accomplished back then would have been through having a husband, having a redeemer. I mean, it was very difficult to live in society back then as a widow. Now, our single women would have still probably been under the roof and the home and the care of their families, but a widower was a little bit different in that society. So guess what? Boaz fits the bill, okay? And so Naomi is going to basically coach Ruth up on here's how you need to handle this, okay? Now, let's talk for a minute about what this is and what this isn't. You know, we're so romance obsessed in our culture that it's hard for us to separate what we know about love and dating with what it might have been back then. Some of you know my friend Carol Salee, who teaches for us in the women's ministry. She always says, don't let today's culture shade yesterday's sensibilities in the culture of that time. We can't look through the lens of our today to look back at what it would have been like then. So we want to keep that in mind. And so accurately, what is happening back here? Well, the first thing I want us to know is Naomi is not setting a trap for Boaz. She's not encouraging Ruth to entrap him, okay? This account is set squarely in the time of the Judges. We've talked about the fact we don't know exactly when in the period of the Judges, but during that period of the Judges, there's also another famous couple that you're probably familiar with. I read about them just yesterday, and that's Samson and Delilah, okay? I want to tell you, there really could not be a more contrasting couple to Boaz and Ruth than Samson and Delilah, okay? And so I don't want us for a moment to confuse that Naomi and Ruth are not trying to lure Boaz into a trap to get him to marry her. That is not what's going on. This was something that God had ordained, this was something that he had allowed them to do. This Levirate marriage is something that was a provision for the people back then. And so this was something that was a known practice. She's not going and being manipulative behind the scenes, okay? This kinsman redeemer is a recognized concept, okay? So the second thing I think we need to notice, if we're being accurate about how this unfolds, is that Boaz had free will, okay? We'll see next week when we study chapter 4 that redeemers did have some choice. They had the ability to decline redeeming. And so we are not, his fate is not sealed here. So there is a little bit of discernment and play and free will going in here. And listen, this could have really gone south for Ruth. Think about it for a moment. If he had not been a man that was trustworthy, there could really have been some tragic events that unfolded that night at the threshing floor if he had not been a safe person for Ruth to do that, okay? The third thing that I think we need to understand, and we've touched on this a little bit, Boaz and Ruth were not dating. Like, we understand the concept of dating, okay? That's not really what was going on back then. So there has not really been any type of, well, let's go have coffee and get to know one another. That is not, now they have gotten to know one another. And in fact, we saw last week that they have really had the opportunity to observe the character of one another. And that is so much more important, I think, sometimes than what we might have as far as physical attraction right off the bat, okay? But right back then, you have to understand, let's just be real, women were property. I mean, women were given up. They were pawns in many business transactions. You might think back to Joshua. We've already referenced this account once in the period of the Kings, but we saw in the book of Joshua that Caleb basically auctions off his daughter Aksa to whoever is going to be able to help him take a piece of land in the promised land. So the fact that we can entrust Ruth to Boaz is actually a really beautiful thing, because it was not an equitable dating situation. That's just not what was available back then to women, okay? They are moving towards a committed relationship. And I think this is important for us to say. God does not ordain the subjugation of women ever. This was a reality back during this culture that women were property. But I want to tell you that really we get the idea for marriage back in Genesis. And here are a few things we see that God ordains for marriage, okay? First of all, we see that there's to be companionship. I mean, the whole creation of woman was born so that he might have a helper to be a companion to Adam. And so there's companionship that's a part of that. They were charged with filling the earth, which means that there's some sexual attraction that's going on. That means they are to have sex and have children. So that is to be a part of it. They are to work together. They are to subdue the land. So there's a partnership there. They're to be committed. They are to have integrity in their relationship. There needs to be fidelity in that. These are all things that God has set out for marriage. Now, at the time, these were not part of every marriage. And I think we could probably say the same for the marriages that we have today. So just understand that God has always had a plan for man and woman. And we are seeing that even in these I think we can at least call it awkward circumstances, we are going to see that God's standard was not lowered. It's interesting. The account seems kind of crazy. And I think because of our our modern day eyes and sensibilities, and just really, I mean, we are just so inundated with sexuality in our culture. It's hard not to look at it and think, that was a little odd. But you know, when mankind leaves God out of the sexual equation, things just get bad very fast. It's interesting. I'm older than a lot of you, and not everybody. I've got a peer here, but I'm older than a couple of you. And one of the things that I will tell you is, right, even before I was born, the sexual revolution came onto the scene for us. Okay, and that was meant to do to put sex on a more equal footing for men and women. And I think there probably, you could argue, were some things that moved us in a little bit of the right direction, but we've gone off the rails at this point. And it's interesting because I love it when culture begins to see that God's way might be better. Just this past week, there was an article that was published in the Washington Post. Christine Emba wrote it, and the title of it is "Consent is Not Enough. We Need a New Sexual Ethic." Okay, so what I want to tell you is, we're looking at some crazy sexual ethics back in the Near East during Bible times, but I want to tell you, we haven't gotten it right yet. Okay, devoid of God's purpose for sex and marriage, we don't get it right. That's just the bottom line. Okay, now the last thing that I want us to see in that passage is that Ruth was actually showing respect. So it seems like she might be acting like a temptress. That's how we might read it with this modern day lens. She was actually showing respect. She was lowering herself. She was making herself vulnerable, recognizing the authority Boaz had as her redeemer. And she is basically signaling to him that I would like for you to redeem me, okay? And she uses that language of spread your wing over me. In some of our translations, it would say, place your skirt, the corner of your skirt on me. And basically, this is all imagery for, I would like for you to redeem me. She is proposing of sorts, okay? So I haven't seen that one on Pinterest yet, but that's kind of what's going on, okay? She is making it known. And listen, it would have been very clear to him. I don't know if y'all have noticed, sometimes you need to be overt with our male counterparts. My husband always says, what are you trying to say here? Like, spell it out for me, okay? So let me just tell you that Ruth is spelling it out for him, okay? He would have been very clear what she is wanting from him. So let's keep reading and we'll see how it unfolds. So she went down to the threshing floor, and she did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." And he said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do all that you ask. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer. Yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then, as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning." So we are going to see that she has made it abundantly clear she would like to be redeemed. And we are going to see him respond so beautifully. I don't know if you've ever had to ask a man to do something, either out on a date, or I can remember when I was in college, it may not be this way anymore, but when I was in college, anytime I was going to our sorority or something hosted a dance, I would have to go and ask the guy. I didn't have a boyfriend, so it wasn't like just assumed. And it just, the pit in my stomach every time. And that was before texting. So I couldn't even like dial it in. Like I had to face do that thing. And it just, every time I wanted to say, oh, what if they reject me? Can you imagine? Can you imagine Ruth going and laying down and being discovered and being alone with this man in a dark place and just wondering, how is he going to respond to this? And he responds so beautifully. He responds in a way that affirms her. He talks about what a worthy woman she is. I mean, how beautiful it is. He didn't just take that. Listen, he says to her, he's known he's a redeemer, and he is impressed that she didn't go after and try and squirm her way out of that, because apparently he's older than she is. And so just the respect and mutual affection they seem to have for one another is so beautiful. And again, not even in a dating context. I love that they have gotten to know one another. Yes, it's hanging over the head that there is, this possible thing, but they just have a mutual respect for one another. They are people of good character. Again, so opposite of a Samson and Delilah. Okay, so opposite. Okay, so as you're just framing this in your head, I think the way we would sum it up is that was really best case scenario. Okay, she goes there, and we end up with best case scenario. So let's finish up and see how this chapter concludes. So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize her. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, bring the garment you're wearing and hold it out. So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then she went into the city, and when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, how did you fare, my daughter? And then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. She replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle this matter today. I think my favorite part of this is that he does not send her away empty-handed. He does not send her back to her mother-in-law, Naomi, without anything. It's one thing to have a man who's like loves you and cares for you and is really upstanding. It's another thing to have a man who cares about the people that you care about and that care for you. I have one of those men. My mom has lived with us for several different points in our marriage. My husband is always so very gracious. And that is a ministry, right? That is a ministry. We see Boaz, that he is not just interested in Ruth, in the things that he might gain. He is interested in protecting her in all of the sense, making sure that her mother-in-law is cared for. He is an upstanding person. And listen, I don't know if you caught this because we have different metric systems, but he's a generous guy. So it's assumed that this is an incorrect measurement system because many commentators I read said that 6 measures of barley would have been almost too much for a person to carry. And so whether or not we understand what a measure is correctly, what we know is he sent her away not just with a little snack for Naomi. He sent her away with a generous offering. And of course, at this point, not even knowing if he would be the one that would be given permission to redeem her. Okay, so that is so beautiful. And here's the main thing that we want to take away. Obviously, this is historical narrative. Obviously, we get a front row seat to what was going on right here in this story. But we also don't want to miss Jesus in this. And you may say, oh, did I already miss him? Where was he? Boaz is a picture of a redeemer to come. Boaz is not a perfect man. He's not a perfect redeemer. He's not redeeming everything. Listen, there was still probably a lot of widows. There were still a lot of broken people in Bethlehem during that time. Boaz isn't taking care of all of that, but we see him pointing the way for one who will come and redeem all. Redemption is possible. You know, in this day and age, one of the things I appreciate is that we understand that not every woman is going to get married. It's a legitimate option to be single. God loves single people just as he loves married people. God calls some people to singleness, okay? And so I love that we don't have this burden that society puts upon us that we have to get married in order to flourish. That is not a biblical concept. But don't miss the fact, just because you might think, well, I'm single and I wouldn't need to be redeemed. The commonality that all of us have, and listen, you're all cute and stylish and all the things, and y'all look all put together. And as far as I know, every one of you are put together. But the reality is, what really we have all in common, we're broken. We're broken people. There has been something in us. We have sinned. We have had sins done to us. There is a brokenness. And so it is not our singleness that needs to be redeemed. It is ourselves that need to be redeemed. And all of us can relate to Ruth in that aspect. And so thank the Lord that there is a Redeemer to come. This story points to a redemption that is coming, that is so perfect, that takes care of the brokenness everywhere, not just the brokenness in this one family. So I would ask us this week to be reflective. Is there a point in your life where you have recognized that you need redeeming, that there is sin and brokenness in your life that you can't take care of on your own? You know, the story of Ruth points us to the most centric act of redemption in all of history, and that is the cross, where Jesus died to cover and atone for our sins. And if that is not a redemption that you know up close and personal, if you have not come to the threshing floor and asked Jesus to be your Redeemer, then I would say call somebody that you're studying with, call somebody at the staff of your church, contact me, and I'll get you in touch with somebody. But that is something that needs to be settled. Redemption is possible. It is available for all of us, no matter what our brokenness, no matter what our sin, no matter what ashes we might feel we are sitting among today. Redemption is possible. So dig deep and get to know the heart of your Redeemer, Jesus, this week through his word. I'll see you next week.